name on it, and I opened it. What I discovered, there was a note from my mom saying the camera that was supposed to be that I asked for on that Christmas was supposed to be delivered, and it was going to be delayed a bit. What I found out was that my father was in a dispute with the IRS over taxes. And I also found out that in early December, the IRS went into his Christmas club and took 100% of the money out. Now, that is a gutless puke, if you ask me. That's just my opinion. So it doesn't mean that they're all gutless pukes, it's just that there are a few. Where's a guy with 8 kids going to hide from the IRS? It's just a thought. But so I've always been of the mind that people need to be protected from taxing agencies because they do things that they're bullies. They can just get away with it. So that's the reason why I'm in the business of dealing with California sales and use tax, because of that motivation in my teenage years. Go ahead, Marcel. Here's who we are. This is the basic core of our employees. We have a few others that are currently working with us, but we've done over 2,400 of these types of exemptions, and not one of our clients has ever paid a dime in tax. All you have to do is hire us and do what you're told. What's important here is the definition of order. We create order in your aircraft documentation process, and we give you orders on what to do that. All you have to do is follow your consultant's advice, and you'll pay zero tax. It's really that simple. And we've been doing this since the beginning of time, since the company started. Here's one of our clients' success
story. Mine was there since day one. I mean, the experience that your team showed, the ability for them to talk about, past cases that they had worked on and how those had went, and almost the certainty that they had that this was going to work and it was going to save us some hassles, both legally and fiscally, was great. My name is David Adler, and we acquired this aircraft to replace another aircraft that we had within our company to transport our CEO and executives back and forth between Mexico and the United States. I found out about Aero Marine through our lawyer who was helping us with the airplane transaction, with the purchase transaction. They referred us to Aero Marine, and they gave us a couple of options. And when I reached out and I spoke with you guys and I discovered how the process works and everything, I was very encouraged by the simplicity of it. And that's why I decided to work with you guys. My concerns about the tax process were non-existent. I didn't even know this problem was something that I needed to address. This was my first aircraft purchase. And thank God for our lawyer referring us to you guys, and thank God for you guys, because without this, I would have probably gotten a very, very big tax bill. So yeah, it was my first purchase, so I didn't know there was these kinds of detailed tax implications. And thanks to the recommendation of my lawyer and the work that I did with you guys, we were able to navigate these with no hiccups. Yeah, I think the most complex part of the process was probably keeping track of all the flights and doing all the flight logs and the receipt and the meeting minutes and all of that stuff, because obviously, you have to show what you're using the plane for. And we fly so much, we put about 6 or 7 hours a week on our plane. So that means a lot of flight logs, a lot of receipt collecting, a lot of chasing down the pilots and stuff. And really, it was easy once Julie and I came up with a system of where we were going to deliver all the deliverables, how we were going to keep track of the receipts, how we were going to keep track of the meeting minutes and everything. And once we established the system with the help of you guys, it was really simple to just, plug and play every time that we flew. So it was awesome. I think that the attentiveness, the attention to detail, I should say, that's one of the things that surprised me the most. I mean, first, every time we called, there was always somebody answering the phone. There wasn't a machine or anything like that. The person who was working with us, in our case, Julie, was always very attentive to our needs and to our questions. The attention to detail in regards to everything. It's very important that when you go through this process, you actually are very detailed on the things that you deliver so that there's never questions and there's always evidence of what you're actually doing. That level of supervision from you guys was awesome. To tell you the truth, when I got the letter, I was already expecting it. I trusted you guys so much and I trusted Julie so much with the process that I knew it was going to come. Like, I don't think I had any doubt in my mind that that was going to happen. Wrongly, right? You never know, something can happen, but I was given so much confidence by your team that I was happy. I mean, if you just look at the amount of money that we saved on taxes, absolutely worth the investment. And then it's also, I think it was priced accordingly. I understand our airplane was one of the bigger ones and it was a big ticket from us. But compared to the amount of money that you save and the amount of work that you guys put in to make sure that the packet that is sent over is complete and correct, I think it's absolutely worth the investment. I don't think this is something that somebody can handle on their own. And I would absolutely recommend, hiring your services to get the help from an expert to help you navigate this and get it resolved.
So that's just one of our somewhere around 2,500 clients. Very, very, very happy with our service. So let's refocus on the events that we're doing here. The Supreme Court proclaimed that every citizen of the United States has a right as well as an obligation to avoid taxes. That's right. The Supreme Court of the United States said you have, as a citizen of the United States, you have an obligation to minimize your taxes. That's the name. So, in a legal way. So anyone may arrange their affairs to make them as low as possible. You're not bound to choose any pattern which best pays the Treasury. Did you know that? Were you aware of that? The legal right of a taxpayer to decrease the amount of what otherwise would be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. The important thing about that case, it was 1934. I will bet you that there is no politician today in office who's ever paid any attention to this. The people who walk around talking about paying fair shares, they're wrong. They're completely wrong. You have the right to minimize your taxes, or in our case, eliminate the taxes. So what's the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance? Tax evasion is illegal. I have guys that call me up. This comes in every day. I'm just going to park my airplane in a friend's hangar out on his ranch. They'll never find me. Yeah, that's illegal. It's tax fraud. You'll get caught. And if you want to spend some time, just call me afterwards and I'll tell you ways you can get caught. Tax avoidant is what is legal. That's where you understand the law or you hire a tax professional to help you go through all this process. And it's a little picky, but you got to do it the legal way if you want to get that letter from the state of California that says you owe zero tax. We've successfully done that over 2,500 times. So we know what we're doing. Don't get your tax advice on the tarmac. Don't get your tax advice, your sales tax advice from your CPA, because most of them are trained primarily in making sure that you pay the right amount of income taxes to either the state or the feds. They're not trained in these tax avoidance systems that the state has built in to help you legally avoid paying taxes in California. So hire us. So there you are. You're thinking about buying an aircraft, a boat, or a vehicle, and you have absolutely no idea of how to exactly do it. That's what this video is for. It's going to explain to you where you're at in the information gathering phase and then how to be successful once you get us hired. When you are looking for information, in other words, you're in the buying stage, you're getting ready to buy an airplane, and you're trying to decide, how do I handle the sales tax problem? It's kind of like standing in the middle of a freeway and having cars drive by you at 70 to 80, or if you're in California at 100 miles an hour, and it's lack of order, it's constant confusion. So what I want to provide for you is I want to take one of those cars that's driving by you at 100 miles an hour and grab it and slow it down for you. What that creates for you is a stable datum, so you can start to process your way through all of the things that you're going to need to know in this process, because there's lots of things that you need to know. Some of them you get from us, some of you get from your aviation attorney, you might have to deal with property taxes, you might have to deal with your CPA. But that is the process that you go through. You start out in a little bit of confusion because you don't know how to do the sales tax thing, and that is what we can do for you to slow down that bit of confusion. But there's two definitions of order. The second definition is an order, when you're giving orders to someone. If you want to be really, really successful with our program, you have to be willing to accept orders from us, because if you hire us before you take possession and then follow all of our instructions or orders, you cannot fail. Why do I say that? Because we never have. So just be willing to let us create the situation where there's some order in your confusion, and then also be willing to take our order, and we guarantee how things are going to work out for you. So I used to, as part of our outflow, we used to have an ad called "Misunderstanding Could Cost You Thousands." Here's what you need to know, and this is out of the fraud statute, the 6481.1, and it can cost you a 50% penalty on the tax. Any purchaser of a vehicle, vessel, or aircraft are registered outside the state of California for the purpose of evading the payment of taxes due under this part shall be liable for a 50% of any tax determined to be due on the sales price of vehicle, vessel, or aircraft. So the prima facie proof that they use that you did it intentionally to evade the taxes is that you didn't file a tax return. So it's a two-step process. You register it to a location out of state, and then you don't file the tax return. They take those two things put together, and they'll charge you with a 50% penalty. I know that there's a lot of people out there who say, register your motorhome or your aircraft in Montana or Delaware. It's a no sales tax state. That's only true if you buy an airplane in that state and it never leaves that state. But if you register your airplane or your vessel in Delaware and never file a tax return, those are the two steps that can make you subject to a 50% penalty and a 10% failure to file charge. So be aware of that. It's right in the law. Now we're going to help you with some definitions. What is sales tax? Sales tax is actually a very narrow definition. Sales tax is imposed on the seller for the privilege of selling personal property at retail. It's measured by gross receipts, and the obligation to pay sales tax is on the retailer. He has the right to reimburse from you his sales tax. But literally, the only way you can be subject on a purchase of an aircraft, vessel, or vehicle is if you take possession inside the state of California and it comes out of the inventory from someone who has a California seller's permit. Yes, this does mean that if someone who has a California seller's permit and delivers a vehicle, vessel, or aircraft to you inside of California and they forget to collect the sales tax from you, you don't owe it. There's no way for them to go back and collect that from you, but they still owe it to the state of California. So the only thing that saves a lot of the retailers on this and being able to collect it from the buyer is that the buyer is trying to maintain a good relationship with the seller. The only way that that works out. So what is use tax? Use tax is every other kind of sale. If you take possession of an aircraft inside of California and the seller is not a retailer, it's a use tax transaction. If you take possession outside of California, it's automatically a use tax transaction. The use tax, rather than the sales tax, applies. So all of the 100% of the exemptions that we use on those 2,500 cases, we start with a single most important point is we take possession outside the state of California. The obligation to pay use tax is on you, the buyer. So just make sure that you understand those two things. Is there any questions at this point about the definition of sales tax or use tax? If you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask it, please. Okay. So in certain cases, whether you're a resident of California or a non-resident of California, it's important to understand. Any aircraft is subject to California use tax if any of the following apply. The aircraft was purchased by a California resident as defined in Section 516 of the California Vehicle Code, or if the aircraft was subject to property tax in California during the first 12 months of ownership. Now, I'm going to give you the Section 516, and we're going to go through it line by line, because the reason why out-of-state CPAs get their clients in trouble is they think with the terms of income tax, because that's what CPAs are trained to do. And California does not use an income tax definition. They use a Section 516 of the California Vehicle Code. So before I go over to this, I want you to put a different hat on. Imagine yourself as a brand new employee of the state of California, and you want to be a hero, and you want to collect tax 100% of the time. Put that hat on. Don't look at this like you're the buyer of the aircraft or vessel or vehicle, because if you do that, you're going to automatically put up a wall and you're going to say, well, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me, and that doesn't apply to me. That's why I want you to think from the viewpoint of you're a brand new person working for the state of California, and you want to apply any one of these little sections of the DMV code to collect the tax. Go ahead, Marcel. These are the evidence of residency for the purpose of vehicle registration. Address where registered to vote. Without getting into the political discussions of how many people are allowed to vote who shouldn't be able to, the important thing is if you're a registered voter in California, you're a resident of California. B, location of employment or place of business. Now, this can be a little bit weird, but if you live somewhere on the East Coast and you were sent to California to conduct a 2 or 3 month audit of an employee, where's your location of employment of place of business? Payment of resident tuition at a public institution of higher education. I thought it was simply resident or non-resident of California was determined if you were paid the resident tuition. I found out years ago when my daughter was looking for colleges to go to that there was a website that allowed people to trade their residency, and therefore were allowed to trade their non-resident status with someone in California for resident tuition. So don't be 100% certain just because that line says something and you apply the way that you think about it in your mind, it can cost you a lot of money. D, attendance of dependents at a primary or secondary school. Let's say that you're a resident of the East Coast and you are married and then you have kids. And then your wife gets a divorce and she moves to California. If they're going to school in California, you're a resident of California for the purpose of aircraft, vessel, and vehicle purchases. Little e, filing a homeowner's property tax exemption. I discovered when I acquired a bunch of jet owners out of the Northwest that they were they had how many of them? Many of them had homes in Southern California out in the desert for trying to get away from the lousy weather in the Northwest. And they had a separate CPA in California. That CPA, because he wanted to save money, filed a homeowner's property tax exemption. Well, guess what? That makes him a resident of California. Again, for the purpose of buying these certain kinds of equipment. Renting or leasing a home for use as a resident. Let's say you're the same person who lives on the East Coast and he had a great year with his company and he brings his family out to Southern California for 4 to 6 weeks to go to all the amusement parks down there. Aren't you renting or leasing a home for use as a resident then? See how you can turn all this around. It's a viewpoint switch. G, declaration of residency to obtain a license or any other person or benefit not ordinarily extended. I've never run into that. Possession of a California, yes.
Oh, sorry. On that renting a home for use, is there a limit on the time? Is 1 week versus 3 months, or does it matter?
If you're trying to be a hero and get $500,000 worth of tax, it won't matter to you, will it?
Okay.
I'm not telling you that you couldn't fight it. I'm telling you that they'll just put you through the ringer, and you want to avoid all that. That's why I'm making you aware of this. Possession of a California driver's license. You'll know whether you have one or not, and that's one of the things that we're going to ask you very up front. But the one I want you to pay the most attention to is little I. That's why it's bolded. Other acts or occurrences or events that indicate presence in the state is more than temporary or transient. Now, I'd love to hear from everybody who's on this webinar, but how would you use it, little I, to collect tax? And again, just unmute yourself and offer up some explanations. Don't be shy. I won't embarrass you.
Doctor's office, dentist office, cell phone bill.
That's partially true. Anyone else?
I'm an insurance broker, and I also go out there to see a client. And I am licensed in the state of California, but I'm not a resident there.
Okay. Anyone else? So the real answer to that is, if you want to be a hero and you want to collect tax, you could use that any way that you want, anything that you could make up. I'm not telling you that just because this person working for the state makes up this reason that you're going to lose that. I'm just trying to save you the grief without making sure first. So make sure that you go through this when you hire us, go through these things, and Julie will keep you out of trouble. The most important thing to remember is that you don't get to decide. The state always gets to decide. I'm again going to remind you, I see that you're unmuted, John. Is there a question for me?
No, I was just thinking about what you were saying about what the employee would be looking for, but I think you covered that better than I could.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Marcel. Put us back where we were. These are the 3 types of exemptions that are known. and they're right in the regulations, and they were written right into the law. The state created the regulations, the interstate commerce test, the principal use test, and the common carrier test. The common carrier test is only available for airplanes. The interstate commerce test is available to anybody that wants to use it. And as we get to that, you'll find out whether you would want to use that with a boat or not. The principal use test is anything: cars, boats, airplanes. Go ahead, ask Marcella. The interstate commerce test, first step is out-of-state possession. Take the delivery while the plane is located outside of California, first step. Second step is first functional use, which is a term created by the state. It must happen before entering California to qualify for the test. The definition of first functional use depends upon what type of plane you buy. So in some cases, it can require that there has to be a passenger, and that's all jets and anything with a turbine engine. And in some cases, it depends upon how many seats are in the craft. So you have to be very aware of this stuff. This is why we'd like you to hire us 6 to 8 weeks before you take possession, so that we can spend some time training on all this. Now, these 3 steps are specifically related to the interstate commerce test while we're talking about airplanes. The third step is you enter California. The day that you enter California, you buy fuel. That fuel ticket, can you go back? That fuel ticket has the date, location, and tail number on it. That date starts a 6-month-long test. Go ahead, Marcel.
Quick question, is that this, as we're talking about aircraft, is that the same for boats, or will we talk about boats after?
Well, it would be the same for boats, but you got to remember that airplanes can go in any direction. Boats can only go where there's water. So you'd have to go, let's say, for example, you took possession of a boat in Southern California. You'd have to take it offshore, which is outside the 3-mile limit. It's a great question. You'd have to go immediately to, let's say, Ensenada, so it's close, okay, for a business reason, and then bring it back. But we have to talk about it in this interstate commerce section, but it's based on nautical miles that you travel on the water. So you'd have to take possession offshore outside the 3-mile limit, go to Ensenada for business, then bring it into California, start the test period. And as long as 60% of your nautical miles for that boat are going back and forth between, let's say, Ensenada and someplace in Southern California, yes, you could use it. But when you went to Ensenada, you'd have to have separate business support for that trip. That's why it's
Even if
not,
the business is not related to the boat.
well, the business doesn't have to be related to the airplane. So the answer is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back now, put your airplane hat back on. The entire basis of the test period is 60% of the total flight hours flown, starting with the first flight out of California after you land here the first time. You start accumulating hours then. Whatever total amount of hours you fly, okay, is the total amount. Multiply that times 0.6, and that's how many flight hours that you have to put on your airplane of the qualifying side. The other 40% are considered the bad side of the test. Bad side of the test for the state is if you're doing training, maintenance flights, or personal flights, or flights within California. So it certainly gives you a lot of personal flying or other flying, but 60% of whatever you fly. And the good news is there's no minimum amount of flight hours required. And if you're using the flight hours must be for commercial purpose. They can be 100% Part 91 hours or a combination of 91 and Part 135. Any interstate Part 135 flight is a qualifying business use flight for this test period. And the good news is the term commercial is not limited to for-profit business.
Question. On the interstate, use, if you leave Sacramento and you go to Idaho, is it the flight time after crossing the border, or is it the entire flight since it's going somewhere else?
Great question. For the purpose of the interstate commerce test, it starts where you take off from and ends where you land. The test period where it would be a flight airspace, we don't use that anymore except for a secondary thing. Bring that back up during when I'm talking about the principal use, and I'll tell you how that works. Did I bring up the part about you can be doing flying for 501c3s and those flights count as commercial? Is there any questions about the way this works or the way it's being enforced? Now, one of the things that I should mention about this is in the interstate commerce test, if let's say you have a motorhome that you're using to, you have a rock and roll band and you're using it to transport the band back and forth across. If you have a motorhome, the first functional use will require, this is a very recent change because they're becoming very, very, very picky. They could require you on that first functional use trip to actually go to a campground and spend the night in it. So that's the kind of little subtle changes that the state of California is making because they're becoming ravenous about collecting tax. A year ago it didn't used to matter. Now it does. That's exactly why you want to get us hired 6 to 8 weeks before you take possession. Doesn't mean you can't hire us after you take possession. Just you'll have to go through these things and make sure that you haven't done something that's fatal. And Julie, who's in charge of all our consultants, is really, really good at helping you through that. Any questions on interstate commerce? Okay. Move on. On the principal use test, which we primarily use for vessels, starts with the out-of-state possession. So it's really important about where you take possession. And the aircraft, vessel, or vehicle must never enter within California within the first 12 months of ownership. The good news in this test period is it doesn't require any extra business documentation. The bad news is you cannot bring it into California at any time, even for a minute, and pass the test. And it's for 12 months. So if you find a boat inside California, you have them deliver it to you outside of California. And then you have to take it to, if you're in Southern California, we have people take it to Ensenada or any place farther down in Baja. If it's in Northern California, we have you take it to Oregon or Washington. So, but you have to, through documentation, support the fact that it was never here. And if you're thinking about airplanes, just remember that with all the internet companies that do tracking, it's pretty hard for you to sneak one in. So don't ever try it. Is there any questions about this particular test? Did we get any off the internet, Marcella?
No, sir. No questions so far.
Okay. So let's move on to charter. the reason why we call this the common carrier is that in the vessel industry, the word charter implies something entirely different than what aircraft. So I try to not use the word charter, even though I just did. This is the only test period where you can take possession inside of California, but we don't recommend it. And because in many cases, we can, if you're having a relationship with a common carrier, or if you are a common carrier, you have your own certificate, we'll try to put you through the interstate commerce test. It will save you some time with our fees. It's a 6-month test period, interstate commerce, instead of a 12-month test period. And this, unlike the interstate commerce test, starts with first operational use, and that's designed as the first time the wheels go up after you take possession. Within the first 12 months of operational use, we require 50% of the aircraft time must be flown in common carriage. The question that nobody has asked, but I'm going to talk about it right now, is the laws and the regulation only require 50%. We've been in this business long enough to know that if you're a pilot and we tell you 50%, you're going to bring it in at 51. If you bring an audit in at 51, the chances of you paying tax go up exponentially, because all the auditor has to do is you capriciously decide to throw out 1 or 2 of your flights, and now it's taxable. We create a 10% margin of error with everyone that we deal with. Every exemption program, we raise it from 50% to 60%. So, and the important thing and the weaknesses in this test period are: the state defines a common carrier flight as a flight that is flown under Part 135. So I'll tell you a story. This is from about 10 years ago. I had a friend who was working in the consumer use tax section, and he was a colonel in the Air Force. And he decided that as long as the charter company charged for those flights that didn't have passengers or cargo on them, he'd allow them. Well, he had the audacity to die. The day he died, he was the guru of all things inside the state of California, and everybody went to him to ask him questions. So the minute he died, he no longer gave his verbal okay to make things happen, and the guys that were continuing to work went back and read the regulations. If that flight is not flown under Part 135, which means it has no passenger or cargo on it, it's not a Part 135 flight. Deadhead or repositioned flights that are billed to the customer do not count. Also, they're on the bad side of the test. So this can be a little bit dicey. One of the things that you can worry about is that if you're an individual who buys an airplane and wants to lease it to a common carrier to meet this exemption, is that common carrier has 100% control over the documentation to support your exemption. So what we strongly suggest is, if you're going to use a relationship with a common carrier, a Part 135 guy, is that you include in your lease agreement with the Part 135 guy the requirements that we have in our contracts with you to provide us all of the documentation on a monthly basis. It just depends upon who you have your relationship with. So go over this with Julie once you hire us, and she'll make sure that you're dealing with someone who's going to be easy for you to deal with and not someone who's going to create a problem for you. Any questions about this charter exemption? Rolando, haven't talked to you in a long time. You got any questions? The silence sounds like no.
One quick question, just for clarification. So interstate commerce is only 6-month test. The other 2 are 12-month tests.
That is correct. The interstate commerce is 6 months from the test period starts the day you enter California. The other two tests, the 12-month tests, start from the day of possession.
Okay, good point. And then that number's changed quite a bit over the years, right? Wasn't it 90 days and 12 months and back to 90 days? Now it's 6 months. Was that back in the Schwarzenegger days? It was bouncing around a lot.
I wish you could give credit to Schwarzenegger for it, but he was around when they, well, my wife tells me not to get very political, but the fact that it went back and forth was because they changed it, and it was illegal to do it because they didn't have a permission from the politicians in California. So then they bribed one Democrat or one Republican to switch his vote to get it cleared. So you're correct. There was a time that it was 90 days, and that 90-day test period still applies to all items that are not aircraft, vessels, or vehicles. So if you're a company that buys large equipment, it's a 90-day test for you. Just be aware of that. Think with it. If you're a company that buys large equipment, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and you've got a division of your company out of state, take possession of it out of state. We'll teach you how to document it out of state for just the 90-day period. But that test is still exactly the way it used to be. They just made a special hard to drill down problem for the aircraft, vessels, and vehicles. It's just they're coming after you because they think you're part of the 1%. So thank you for the questions. Next, Marcelo. So the CDTFA, which is the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, is claiming to be short-staffed, causing the two-part review to take exponentially longer than usual. We will follow up with them monthly for however long it takes until you receive your exemption. Depending on whose desk it lands on, their interpretation of the law can be very different. One person could review a tax return in a few months, whereas another could take 6 months. And it's just the inefficiencies of state government. But there was a time back when I first started this company that we would submit tax returns and we would get an answer within 90 days. That's very, very seldom. Now there are certain ones that take up to 2 years after the point that we file it on your behalf. We're not doing something to slow it down. The inefficiencies of the government work is what causes that. Any questions about that? So we would love to talk to you.
Yeah, I got one question quickly on that. Is there a time limit to where they can't go back after so many years or whatever?
After you've filed it?
Yeah.
Once you've filed it, they have to deal with it, but there's no time limit that forces them to deal
So if
with
it takes them 8 years, it takes them 8 years, huh?
Yep. The flip side of that is there is a statute of limitations that if they fail to contact you within 8 years after the 12-month test period, which would be a total of 9 years,
God.
then the statute of limitation has expired. So if they have not contacted you or you have not filed a tax return within 9 years from the date of purchase, you're scot-free because there is the statute of limitations applies to them. So I'd love to talk with you all personally. Many of you are in my database, so I call you fairly often. But there's our phone number. There's mine and Marcella's email address. There's our website. I'd love to talk with you. And does anybody have any lingering questions or questions that were not covered?
I do. Hey, Tom, you started with the resident status, right? So as a California resident, is it still possible to do the purchase via the principal use test?
Yes, that's a good point. There's a little bit of confusion there. The only place where the residency really becomes an issue, okay, is, well, I'll back up. If you follow the rules of the regulation, the exemptions, it doesn't matter whether you're a resident or not, is the best way to answer that. So we'll go back to where I was talking about not registering it out of state. There is nothing wrong with registering your aircraft outside the state of California if you file before the exemption or are granted the exemption. I might have, Clarissa, I might have confused you a little bit because I probably started a little bit earlier. But thank you for the question. Does that help?
Okay, so just to confirm, so via the principal use test, as a California resident, it does not apply. I would still, so in my case would be a vessel. As I buy a vessel, let's say Southern California, leave it in Mexico, right, for 12 months, I'm still registering that purchase, right? Or how does that work?
You can register it inside of California or outside of California. It makes no difference if you take possession of it outside of California. So if you find a vessel that's inside of California that you want to buy, you just have them deliver it to you outside the 3-mile limit. And if you're in Southern California, you take it down to Ensenada, go to the Hotel Corral, get to know Fido, the dock manager down there, and you're
I'd
going
say
to be.
the odds of us already buying outside of California are very high, right? So it's more about like, hey, even being a California resident, as long as I keep the vessel for a minimum of 12 months outside of California, that's all it matters, correct?
Yes. Possession outside, first step. Second step is keeping it outside and documenting that you've kept it outside for 12 months. Great question.
Tom, are there situations where you keep it outside California in another state and incur liability there as a use tax for that state, or you're just avoiding California tax but gaining, I don't know, Oregon tax or somewhere else?
It's a great question. You go over that with, I know this comes up all the time with airplanes. You go over that with Julie and she'll help. We will do the research. We'll try to keep you out of states that we know you're going to run into a problem. Did that answer your question or was it incomplete?
Yeah, so you do have to be cognizant of where you're putting it because you might incur a tax liability somewhere else while avoiding California.
Yes, and the other thing, it's a great question. Every state creates its own sales and use tax laws and its own sales and use tax procedures. So while I'm not an expert in any other state, we have to be cognizant of that, and we will try every way in the world to help you not run into that problem.
Okay, and my last question is, are fees based upon a percentage of the tax savings or is it a flat fee?
Yes. Our fee structure is this. Anything that you buy that's priced at $550,000 or less, it's a flat fee of $5,500, regardless of what exemption you go through, except the common carrier one. And then anything that's over $550,000, we charge 1% of the purchase price, capped at $25,000. If you switch to the common carrier test, we take whatever we would have charged you on the interstate commerce test, and we add $5,000 because the test period is doubled from 6 months to 12 months.
Say that last one again. I'm sorry.
If you're buying an airplane and you decide you want to do the charter exemption, you want to take the 12 months, okay, we use the fee structure that I just gave you, $5,500 for everything under $550,000. Everything over that is 1% of the purchase price, capped at $25,000. So if you bought a $20 million airplane, our fee would be $20,000 for the interstate commerce, and you decided to put it on a charter, it would add $5,000. And we do you a better deal than that. We offer you a special program where, let's say, using that same example on a $20 million airplane, excuse me, a $2 million airplane, is that we will start you on the interstate commerce test. And if we can keep that test period at 6 months and still claim the exemption, we save you $5,000 in our fees, and we still save you 100% of the tax. Do you feel like you can own that explanation now? I'm afraid I walked you around in circles.
No, that's good. Thank you.
John, Clyde, any questions? You're still unmuted.
Yeah, and that one of the early slides you talked about that 50% penalty if your sole purpose for registering whatever it is out of state is to not pay the tax. So what other purpose would you have, I guess? Do you have to establish some reason for being in the state that you're registering it in? Someone have a business interest there, or how do you avoid that being your sole purpose of registering out of state?
The real answer to that is, if you're going to register out of state and you're going to be subject to tax, potentially subject to tax in California, is if you go through the exemption process by filing the tax return, it takes away their prima facie proof that you didn't file the tax return, which would make it taxable here, subject to the 50% penalty. Did that help, or did it?
Okay, so filing the return basically cuts the legs off of that, because then you've basically declared it at that point, and they can't use.
Yeah, if you file the tax return, there's no fraud penalty.
Okay, all right, I got it.
So it's totally okay to register aircraft, vessels, and vehicles outside the state of California, and you file a tax return to exempt you for yourself from the California tax. You've taken away anything that would cause you a fraud penalty because you filed the tax return.
I got it. Okay.
Any other questions? You got a question, Kent? Did you raise your hand? Unmute yourself. Type your question in the chat, and Marcella will relay the question to me.
Thank you, Tom. My flight's here. I got to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay.
While we're waiting for Kent to take a picture of this URL that's on your screen, and we'll send you a free copy of our ebook, a $99 value. It's everything that I've written on legally avoiding California tax on your aircraft or vessel or vehicle purchases.
I don't see any questions in any of the chats yet. I do want to mention that if any of you guys missed getting our contact information or any of that, let me know in the chat and I will go back to that slide or send it to you.
Kent, you can just send me an email and I'll answer your question.
And Craig typed in chat, thank you for your time and presentation. Very informative and much appreciated.
Thank you for the acknowledgement very much.
Tom, thanks for doing that. It's good talk.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Kent. Cedric, Robert, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Marcella. Thank you.
Bye now.
No worries.